Welcome to the Horn Takes podcast, your very rough around the edges Texas sports talk destination. I'm your host, Sean Redfern. It's Exaggeration Monday. We don't have a lot to exaggerate today because we're coming off a bye week, but it is Houston Cougar week. First time we've played since 2002. I did not think it was that long ago that we played the Houston Cougars. So it'll be cool to kind of renew that old Southwest Conference matchup probably one more time. Texas is in a good position with a 5-1 start. And as the late Al Davis said, just win, baby. That's all Texas needs to do. And all they need to worry about for the rest of the season is just winning. Today, we'll take a quick look back at the first half of 2023. We'll kind of talk about some keys going forward to Texas as they try to round out this second half of the season. And then we'll dip a little bit into how Sark's doing in year three. Been a lot of talk about Sark, how good he could be at Texas. So we'll talk about whether we feel like he's on track or not, whether we feel like maybe he's a little behind, maybe he's a little ahead. We'll talk about it. We got Nash from at Nash Talks Texas and at Texas Clips. You can find him on YouTube at both of those. You can find him on Twitter at Nash Talks Texas. By the way, this Texas Clips deal is awesome. He does a condensed version of every single play of every single Texas game, every single weekend. I know I appreciate it. I'm sure a lot of other fans appreciate it. Nash also does Get Your Horns Up show every Monday through Friday on Orange Bloods Live. That's at Orange Bloods Live on YouTube. Again, check Nash out at Twitter and YouTube. Welcome to the show, Nash. How you doing today?
I'm doing good, man. I appreciate all the plugs. Thank you.
Absolutely, man. Anytime. Check us out on Twitter and TikTok at Horn Takes. You can check us out at YouTube as well at Horn Takes. Podcast is at Horn Takes Podcast at buzzsprout.com. Let's jump into it. A little look back at the first half of 2023. Texas is 5-1. Big win on the road at Tuscaloosa. Number 8 in the AP poll right now. As high as number 3. Did the first half of the season play out like you thought it might, Nash?
4 points short of what I thought would. Well, we're technically 5, but yeah.
So you were thinking 6-0.
I had us undefeated, so.
Fair enough. Yeah, I think a lot of Texas fans thought 5-1 was probably a realistic possibility. I just don't think people thought we would have a loss to OU at this point. I think most people were probably thinking Alabama's going to be the game Texas drops if they drop one in the first 6. I know I was pretty surprised by the OU game myself. Not that, it turned out the way it did. That game is always crazy. You can kind of throw any of the records, any of the rankings out the window generally. You never know what you're going to get out of the Red River Shootout. But I think it's pretty interesting that OU, after a really terrible season last year, has been able to rebuild through the transfer portal and get themselves in a really good position at 6-0 this early in the season. How about good and bad? What surprised you the most about this 2023 Texas Longhorn team through 6 games?
What surprised me the most? I hadn't really thought of this. Any of these don't really have much prepared on this, but just off the top of my head, probably linebackers.
Is that good or bad?
Good.
Okay. I know the Texas running game hasn't skipped a beat, and I know you guys, you for sure are on the internet all the time. You're on Twitter all the time, following Jonathan Brooks's progress in 2023 and sort of ranking it against last year's running backs. It's right in lockstep with everything those guys did. I didn't expect the running game to really fall off a lot, but I think all Texas Longhorns fans are probably a little bit surprised at just how dominating it has been at times. I think the sort of the negative surprise for me offensively has been the lack of explosive plays in the passing game. And I know we have some, so it's not like it's been completely anemic, but I think if you look at the lineup we've got out there, you got Worthy, you got Adonai Mitchell, you got JT Sanders, who's had a couple of really, really big games and then an injury where he couldn't play a lot. And then Jordan Whittington, not a lot of huge down the field plays outside of that Alabama game. What do you think about that?
I mean, this isn't really much of a surprise to me. For example, Jonathan Brooks, I would have been surprised if he wasn't doing what he's doing right now, because this is everything that he's shown us was say he's going to be performing like this, which is at the level of Bijan Robinson. It's like side by side right next to Bijan.
Yeah, I know you're a big statistical guy. You like to dig into this.
It's not just statistics. It's more than statistics. But so when you go on and just aside from that, uh, at the end of the day, I'm not surprised about what Steve Sarkisian's doing with the play calling and not going downfield. Like I told people, I had a video that a lot of people they got all up in a tizzy about me saying that Jonte Cook wasn't going to get a ton of receptions in year one, not even just a ton of targets in year one. And the reality was people were I mean, there were some people that were just getting outrageous, saying Xavier was going to be like third on the team in targets and just crap like that. It's just at the end of the day, Steve Sarkisian, he wants to run the football. A lot of people were expecting this high flying offense that boom, 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 we're going to just pass all the time. That's not what Steve Sarkisian is going to do. He wants to run the ball. Everything is built off the run, so nothing really has surprised me this year.
That's pretty interesting take, honestly, because I've heard Steve Sarkisian say, multiple times since he's been at Texas, he wants to run the football. Everything starts with the run, and they want to get people over the top. But if you look at what really happens in games, typically we start out throwing the ball, and we don't really get into the running game until the second series.
Yeah, but if you look at the splits it's a near 50-50 split. Like, I mean, we're at yardage, play percentage, we're one of the most balanced teams in the country.
Absolutely. I don't disagree with that at all. I'm just talking about, like, what we saw at the end of last year. You saw Steve Sarkisian in a couple of games sort of midseason almost abandon the running game, and it cost him. And then you saw him down the stretch when the passing game wasn't doing what it needed to do. He went back to the run. We saw really dominant rushing performances, especially in that Baylor game. And then even this season, to me, it seemed like it took a while for Steve Sarkisian to really start leaning on Jonathan Brooks. I don't know if that's just a perception of mine, and maybe it is based off of what I saw last year. And just, man, I don't know if you've seen any of my other shows, but I've been on Steve Sarkisian for like 3 years now. Let's just run the football. You've got the guys, especially this season, the offensive line, a lot more experience. I think the talent is much better this season than it's been in a very long time at the University of Texas along the offensive line. I'm all about the running game as well. I want to see Jonathan Brooks get more carries. What do you think about his usage of CJ Baxter so far this season? It looks like he's not healthy at all. He comes into games, very first play of almost every single game he's been on, he comes up hobbling. What do you think about that?
I mean, there's not too much. CJ Baxter, he's a really talented guy. But at the end of the day, it's just what Jonathan Brooks is doing is special right now. And I mean, look, I would certainly love if CJ Baxter is better than Jonathan Brooks, and that means that we get something that's even more special. But like you're saying, I mean, at the end of the day, the best ability is availability. And right now I would like to see not Jonathan Brooks. I'd like to see Cedric Baxter get fully healthy. And I think hopefully we see this after having a bye week off is maybe we've just been rushing back a little bit too soon, which I don't necessarily get because I think we have some really good, I think like Jaden Blue.
Yeah, absolutely.
Really fine running back. Red's been actually kind of looking like he looked like he was in the doghouse, and now he's coming out of the doghouse and he's starting to perform again. But at the end of the day, I mean, I was for a second like saying, hey, let's get Jonathan Brooks more carries, but no. He's in the 18 to 25 range right now as it stands. Oklahoma, he had 27 touches, so that's nearly 50% of our touches. So it's just that's more like in the 30%, 30 to 35% range. But still, that's such a large percent of our touches. I can't really, argue to have a guy touch more than the ball 30 times a game.
Yeah, I mean, it's up for debate, obviously. I like Jonathan Brooks a ton. I think he's the catalyst for the offense. I think when he's on the field, good things happen offensively. When he's not on the field, the offense seems to sputter a lot more often than not. Back to CJ Baxter, I'm with you 100%. He's hurt. I don't know why. Not 100% CJ Baxter is better than Jaden Blue in the eyes of the coaching staff. I really like Jaden Blue and his ability. Now, maybe there's things going on in practice. Maybe he's got attitude. Maybe there's school, all the things that none of us get to see. Who knows what's going on there? But he's traveling with a team, and in some games he's getting carries. I'd like to see him get a lot more carries. I think physically he's one of the most talented backs on the team. He probably is the most talented back on the team. He's got really good speed. To me, he looks a lot like, well, I won't say he looks a lot like, but he has the same type of cutting ability that Bijan Robinson had. He's the closest thing to that that's in this running back room, in my opinion. I think Jonathan Brooks is really elusive. It's just in a different way. He's really, really smooth. He can shift those hips in mid stride almost and just make people miss. It looks a lot different though than what we had with Bijan Robinson and even what you'll see with Jaden Blue. What do you think? So we talked last time you came on. I believe you came on the show, I think it was before the season started. If it wasn't, it was like week 1. We talked a little bit about battered fan syndrome and how Texas fans seemed really down headed into the season. I think the Red River Shootout probably took a lot out of a lot of Texas fans. Again, we talked about it a minute ago. I don't think a lot of people were expecting that loss. Is there any warrant at all for some battered fan syndrome for this Texas Longhorn fan base?
I don't think so. I mean, it was a 4-point loss. We lost with 17 seconds left on the clock. Like at the end of the day, like I know a lot of fans that they want to get mad at Steve Sarkisian for running the ball with Jonathan Brooks at the end. Or at the end of the day, we took the lead with 1:17 seconds left, and that should be enough. The defense lost the game. Like as many as for all the people that want to say the offense lost the game, we just had 527 yards, and like that. Like with all due respect, no, the offense did not lose the game. No,
yeah, I agree. I mean, I think
the play call got us within. We were not in the field goal range, and then we get in the field goal range, giving the ball to Jonathan Brooks, and then we kick a game-winning field, what should have been a game-winning field goal. And I mean, if that's how you got to go down, looking that bad, letting up even when you're looking bad, it takes 2 just complete breakdowns where you're leaving 2 wide receivers wide open, like nobody's covering them within 15 yards. The last one in the end zone, people were within like 10 yards, but leaving dudes wide open, just completely uncovered. If that's how Texas is going to have to take their losses this year, I'm fine. I'll take it. I'm not like, I don't want to see that again, obviously, but that shows me that teams either have to have a lot of things going their way or they have to play some damn good ball to beat Texas.
Yeah. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, like, at the end of the day, we're 5 points from 6-0. I know. Here's the deal: a lot of Oklahoma writers would probably still pick Texas in a rematch. Just they'd have it a lot closer than I thought it would.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I made I talked about it on the show late last week about how Texas would. If Texas can run the table and Oklahoma runs the table and they both wind up in the Big 12 championship game, I believe Texas will absolutely be favored in that Big 12 championship game rematch. The one counter, though, I would say about the battered fan syndrome, we don't see it nearly as much, but we see a lot of the same things we saw in 2021, 2022 that sort of hampered those teams. We see them show up every once in a while with this team, and there appears to be like a new problem with the 2023 version of the Texas Longhorns. Really slow starts. The only game we really started out just ass on fire was the Baylor game. I think defensively we came out in that Alabama game and really started fast there, but it took the offense a little bit to get going. I think that's fine. Alabama has a really good defense, and that's the type of SEC game you're used to seeing, right, where you got 2 really powerful teams on both sides of the ball, and it takes a while to figure all that out. So the Alabama game I'm not so concerned about. But I am a little bit concerned about some of the slow starts in some of the other games, and especially the really slow start from a turnover perspective against Oklahoma. To your point, though, that's the only time that's happened. That it's always a crazy game. I don't feel like I have battered fan syndrome, but I still feel like there's some things that Steve Sarkisian and the coaching staff have got to get figured out as we head into this final 6 games of the season, because I think if you look at that schedule, it doesn't look too scary, but I think there's some teams on that schedule that could beat you if you do some things like they did in that Red River shootout. The turnovers, the really just sort of not great effort in the red zone offensively, and then defensively, they lost situationally like every possible way you could lose. They gave up points at the end of the second half. They gave up points at the first drive of the end of the first half. They gave up points the first drive of the second half, and then they ultimately gave up the game-winning touchdown on the last Oklahoma drive of the game. You got to figure you got to win one of those. And so I think situationally, there's things on both sides of the ball, even special teams, going after that block the second time. And it's crazy because I saw the play. I was in the stadium. I saw Keelan Robinson come down, and then as soon as the ball was snapped, he slipped. And at that point, he should have just stopped because he should have known he's not getting there. I've slipped. I don't have any momentum anymore. He tries to make a play, which is an effort play, and I don't blame anybody for that. But situationally, you got to be smarter. And I think there's some things like that still linger for this team. I think that it's all fixable, and that's the good thing. We talked a little bit about these last 6 games of the season. Headed into week 8, Texas doesn't completely control its own destiny in the Big 12. It did get a lot of help with that West Virginia loss to Houston, obviously. How do you see the second half of this season playing out for Texas?
Well, so I think that we do have a control of our destiny, because if you look at the teams that are also with the one loss, if all these teams finish with one loss in the Big 12, I'm not sure if all these teams can. I don't think it's like mathematically possible. But even if it is, what it's looking like it's going to come down to is it's looking like it's going to basically skip down to step 4 on the and I know there's a bunch of
tie-break rules, yeah.
Try and go through them all, but basically it's just going to come down to it's going to skip a bunch of steps on the tiebreakers, because it's just all tie break, and it's going to come down to strength of record. At the end of the day, Texas has faced Oklahoma wasn't ranked 6th when we played them, but Texas has faced I think what was it, 13th or 11th Oklahoma, 25 Kansas. So I don't think that other teams are going to be able to have that strength of record in the conference. And I think that's going to, if we get to a tiebreaker scenario, it's going to be strength of record. That's going to be either putting Texas in or not putting us in.
Yeah, I guess when I look at controlling your own destiny, all you got to do is win and you're in. I think there's situations.
That's what I'm saying is if we win, we should be, if we just win. If we win and everybody else wins, at the end of the day, Texas should have the better strength of record in the conference. So we still control our own destiny.
Fair enough.
Tiebreaker or not, it's still controlling.
Fair enough. How do you see this season playing out the last 6 games?
I see this team finishing out and making it to the Big 12 championship in December.
So you're calling
Oklahoma at 12-1.
Okay. So you're calling a 12-1.
Well, no, season? Okay, I know 11-1, but I'm saying they get their shot to go 12-1.
Fair enough. Yeah, I think the team is more than capable of winning out, including a rematch against Oklahoma. I'm a lot like you. You could look at that game 2 different ways with Oklahoma, but I agree with you 100% that a lot of things had to go wrong. They still had an opportunity to win it. They did make a play to technically win it, and just couldn't finish the last minute and 15 seconds, minute and 17 seconds, whatever it was. For me, we talked about it. I still think there's a tendency to kind of shoot themselves in the foot sometimes with the penalties, the turnovers, the mental stuff where they get themselves into some trouble penalty-wise, especially those procedure penalties. Those drive me nuts. And then we already talked about, in that Red River shootout, some situational stuff that definitely can be fixed, but it certainly harmed them in that game in particular. And then I sometimes, and this is the biggest one for me, I don't know what it is. A lot of people just say, oh, Texas plays down to their competition. I don't know if it's necessarily that, but it does seem like it's much easier for Texas teams under Steve Sarkisian to get up for like a big game, a game where they're an underdog, than it is for them to get up for games where they're clearly the favorite. What's your take on that?
I don't really necessarily agree with that. I think that what Tom Herman, you saw in the Tom Herman years, you saw us play like up to an LSU, and then we just fall flat on our faces after that. Same team that'll lose to Maryland can go out there and play one of the best college football teams that we've ever seen on the face of the planet in the history of time, play them down to the wire. So and at the end of the day, like I've seen of Steve Sarkisian where he's gone out there and he hasn't showed up against a big opponent. He's lost that game. But I'm not really too worried about it because at the end of the day, the issues were in the fourth quarter in the past, and he's at like slow starts or not, we're coming out there and we're finishing these games, and I think there's a mentality deal to that.
Yeah, definitely. You can tell they've worked on finishing it, and I even think Steve Sarkisian mentioned it earlier this season.
It was a emphasis. It was a point of emphasis in the offseason.
Absolutely. And I think he mentioned that they may have emphasized that too much, which might explain some of these slower starts they've had. It's an interesting way to look at it. Do you see any teams on this schedule the rest of the way that you think Texas could drop to?
Yeah, there are teams that Texas could drop to, but I don't think it's going to happen.
That's fair enough. I look at a K-State team at home, or Texas will be playing them at home as a team that's one of those possible teams. I think TCU on the road, even though they've struggled this season, I think that's a game that you go into. It's a road game one. They're not doing that great in college football this year at all. I think that's a mental type of hurdle that this team has got to get over. Is not taking those types of teams for granted. So to me, I think those are the two I would look at and say that there's the best chance out of that final six teams. Those two teams have the best chance.
The one I'm most worried about is Iowa State. Iowa State's been better than we thought they were going to be, and that is the second time that we hop on a plane and go out of state.
Yeah. I mean, it could be. They definitely hate some Texas, 100%. Keys going forward for this team. So you got them going 6-0 the rest of the way. You got them in the Big 12 championship game. What do they have to do to get there for you?
Just lean on Jonathan Brooks and have just get that defense back going and continue to play a stout run defense and just handle business. Don't make mistakes, because at the end of the day, if Texas just plays what they can play, and I mean, forget about playing to your ceiling. If you just handle business and you don't make egregious mistakes, we're going to be walking out on this back half of the schedule 6-0, and we'll be meeting up with Oklahoma in December, and that'll potentially be a playoff game, play-in game for the playoff.
Yeah, I agree with you. It could be. It's interesting. The very first thing out of your mouth was lean on Jonathan Brooks. I had written down here, lean on the run game. Jonathan Brooks had 726 yards already this season. He's cashing in at 6.7 yards per carry, 6 touchdowns. He's good enough for 9th in the country right now in rushing yards, and he's played 1 less or 2 less games than all but one of the guys that's sitting in front of him in that list. So really amazing year for Jonathan Brooks. I think also be better in the red zone. There are 11 touchdowns and 24 trips, which is 46%. Not that great. It's tied for 70. They're tied for 70th overall in red zone offense efficiency, 83% conversion rate there in the red zone. So not what you'd really be expecting with an offense with that many weapons, with a pretty decent seasoned and really powerful offensive line. And then you mentioned the defense, and I thought you're spot on with that. We need more big plays out of the defense. 14 sacks so far this year. They had 27 last season. They're tied for 53rd right now with sacks. 14 sacks, 28 sacks, just not going to get it done in a pass-happy Big 12 conference, I don't think. And I think forced turnovers as well. Right now they're tied for 77th in the country with only 8 forced turnovers, which if you extrapolate it out is 3 better than last season. But last season wasn't very good. 13 last season. So I think from the defensive side, we just need more big plays out of this defense. If you're going to bend and not break, you got to take every once in a while. And I'm down with bend but don't break, but I just want to see us add that take part of it that we just haven't been that that good at so far. And then I think the other key defensively is figuring out that back end. The back end, there's a lot of rotation going on, which I like. I've talked multiple times this season about how Texas can probably rotates more kids in and out of defense than any team in the country. It's like a revolving door. Lots of kids have gotten lots of snaps out there for the Texas Longhorns defense. I think it's time to figure out pare that rotation down and really start leaning on some of these guys that through these first 6 games have really sort of separated themselves from the rest of them. I really like Derek Williams. I think that he's played a lot of snaps. He's made a lot of plays already as a true freshman. So I'd like to see the safeties get pared down and really start to lean on 2 or 3 of them really versus this sort of revolving door rotation. What do you think about that?
Man, I just wanted to make a comment on the bend don't break thing. I've seen some people like start to come back out of the, they feel safe now and they're hopping out of their groundhog holes and talking about we need to bring in Gary Patterson, get rid of PK. That is some of the worst nonsense I've ever heard in my life from Texas fans. Still, at the end of the day, what he's doing is we had a bad game versus Oklahoma, but what he's done defensively is it's honestly nothing short of remarkable.
I think from you look at year 1 to year 3 under PK, this Texas defense in year 3, over the course of these first 6 games, if you don't just nitpick certain moments, has been really, really good. No doubt about that. And I think
if you want to, like you're talking about nitpicking, if you just decide to not nitpick against this, like if you say, we're not going to look at just this Oklahoma game, like this Texas defense is right on par. They were up going right into the Oklahoma game. They were right on par with the 2008 defenses, like the 2008, 2009, 2005 defenses, national championship winning defenses.
Yeah.
Like this team was on par with them. Now we did have a bad week, fell a little bit, but at the end of the day, I mean, like if you look at it, we're still a top 30 run defense in the nation, and we just let Dylan Gabriel have his way with us. That's probably in the last 2 years. That's probably a top 2, top 3 rushing performance against Texas.
Yeah, he got a couple of really big plays, I think, and that's really what added to that total.
I mean, 50% of his rushing yards came from 2 plays.
Yeah. So and those count obviously, but and I don't think Texas was necessarily expecting Dylan Gabriel to run the ball a whole lot. I don't think that was something they probably worried about most of the week.
Even in the game. I mean, like the 2 rushes that I'm talking about like took place well at the end, and I know some people were on Twitter saying, "Hey, why don't we have a spy on Dylan Gabriel?" Well, that's because he hadn't. He had, up till the third to last drive, he had ran for 50 yards on 12 carries. So it's like, why do you need to spy a guy like that? You don't, unless you had a crystal ball, a magic genie with a crystal ball, and you knew, oh crap, there's an 11-yard, 44-yard rush coming up soon. We need to put a spy out there.
Right. Yeah, I think the average fan doesn't necessarily understand a lot about game planning and a lot about why you do certain things and why you don't do certain things. Dylan Gabriel coming into that game, not a huge threat to run. Again, they probably he's athletic. Don't get me wrong, but that's just not part of his game. Like it hasn't been a big part of their game heading into that game. So I didn't have any problem with any of the schematic things Texas did as it pertained to Dylan Gabriel. Really in that game, the only thing I just absolutely loathe, and I loathe it, period. I don't even – anytime I see a team do it, it drives me crazy. The 3-down linemen and the sort of really soft zone stuff, there's no way – you're a statistics guy. I want you to one day look at this and then let me know. Maybe I'm wrong. I feel like there's no way that even makes sense statistically. If you just look at percentage of scores that come off of something like that, there's got to be like a – if you're over 45 seconds, it's a bad idea to do that type of deal. And I just threw a number out there. Like OU certainly was right to do it at the end of that game with 15 seconds left in the game. Texas, I thought, was completely not smart at all to go into that type of defense. They did it at the end of the first half, and they did it at the end of the second half. Bit them both times. Talking about Sark going into year 3. So year 3 is kind of the year where fan bases and I think probably like, analysts and all that stuff really start to really stop to give grace to coaches anymore. You've been there for three years. You've had an opportunity to bring in your own recruiting classes, turn over the roster, all that stuff that a coaching staff does when they come to a new place. Sark's now halfway through his 3rd season. What are your thoughts on the job Steve Sarkisian's done at Texas through 2.5 seasons?
I'll answer that in just a second. I did want to touch on the end of the half. I initially agreed with you that we were going out there and we were playing way too passive of a defense, but I disagree on that after like looking at it further. I think what it comes down to is you just cover 2 dudes. If you don't leave Drake Stoops running wide open, like it looks like the cornerbacks, they are off. But they were, at the end of the day, they were playing off all game. It's just if you watch it, if you go watch Derek Williams and go watch Jalen Ford on the 3rd to last play or something like that, where Drake Stoops is just left wide open and uncovered at the very end, and because it's a good point of what I'm saying here is it's not you can't play quarters coverage. You can't play any of that stuff. You can't play that really passive. What am I looking for? What's that? Prevent defense. Right. You can't play that defense in the red zone when you're 10 yards out from the end zone. But Texas still lets a wide receiver run wide open, and it's just, I think that was the issue. It was a breakdown. It was a breakdown in defense. Versus,
I think there's a difference between really what you're talking about is a difference between man coverages and zone coverage. You're right. Texas played off the whole game, but they still played a lot of man coverage. And then in those situations, they go to these zone coverages.
Well, no,
and
that wasn't man coverage. That was a man coverage play. That's what I'm saying. Is so Derek Williams this is exactly what happened. Derek Williams, you can actually hear Steve Sarkisian talk about this. He tries passing off the coverage. Now, I'm not sure if he tried passing off the coverage to Jalen Ford because we can't see that. It doesn't show us that in the film. But, I mean, I have an all-22 showing of it's either Derek Williams or Jalen Ford that's supposed to be running man with Drake Stoops at the end there, and they're not. And really, that's what makes it look like we're playing a zone, we're playing a very prevent style defense. The reality is we weren't. Pete Kwiatkowski, he called play, and the players didn't execute.
Fair enough. I'll have to go back and look at that because being there live, I thought, it just looked real soft.
No, I mean, I agree. I agree. I had all the same initial expectations, but when I went back and I looked at it, I was like, it's just different. You look at especially when you go and you watch the play where Emmanuel Ocho is breaking it down. It's the exact same thing. Derek Williams, as a play, not play right before, but play 2 plays before, Derek Williams goes to communicate, and I don't think this is necessarily on Derek Williams because if he communicated, it's on both people. One, you got to be able to, you got to hear that, and then 2, you got to make sure it's heard. So,
fair enough.
But you were asking about my thoughts going into Steve Sarkisian year 3.
Yeah.
I know, like you said, a lot of people they might be ready to jump ship on the year 3 mark or whatever, starting to stop giving a guy graces or whatever. But I think he's done a really good job here, in my opinion.
I think Sark's done
it was not an easy task for him for what he had to do. I think a lot of people can lose sight that we couldn't even run. And when you say we're running one offensive line at the offensive line that we were running, just off the top of my head, I honestly probably might take the New Mexico State offensive line. I don't even know their names. I don't know the roster. I know nothing about that. I just know New Mexico State should have nowhere near the level of an offensive line that Texas should. And when you're looking at the 2021 teams, I don't think there's many teams in the nation that I wouldn't have traded offensive line for.
Yeah, they were bad.
It's also not. I don't think it's really fair to say bad. It's just the bodies weren't here. I mean,
that's part of it.
We were relying on a true freshman, Cole Hudson. Like, hey, early enrollee, we kind of need you to like now. We don't have time.
Yeah, and when I say things are bad, I don't mean that necessarily that the talent's not there, that the scheme's not there. Sometimes you're right. You just don't have the bodies. And Steve Sarkisian came into a situation where you just absolutely didn't have the bodies where you need to have bodies to be a really good football team. Me personally, I think his approach to building the program through culture and through just stacking talent the way he has is amazing. I love Steve Sarkisian. I think he's a legitimately good dude. He's obviously a very smart guy. He's coached at some of the most prestigious, college football programs in the country. He's coached in the NFL, so obviously he knows what he's doing. I think the recruiting has just been phenomenal. He took over a 7-3 team with holes all over the roster and ended up keeping the 15th ranked class together. It wasn't a great class, but he kept it together, was able to get Xavier Worthy to jump on into Texas's ship, which was obviously a huge move. Xavier Worthy's been a very productive player for the University of Texas over the last 2 to 2.5 years. Then his first year, he goes 5-7, signs the number 5 team in the number 5 class in the country, goes 8-5 after year 2, signs the number 3 class in the country. So he's stacking talent, and he's putting together probably a top 10 class for 2024. Could go even higher, just depending on what they're able to do as they finish down the stretch. But already a really good class, and a good class from not just like a numbers and stars perspective, but again, the right types of players that will fit onto this roster to do what we need to do to go forward. Been doing a great job. Brought in and maintained a really good coaching staff. I mean, they've only lost 2 guys off the original coaching staff. He's been able to make good hires to get people into those 2 positions. I think, on the other side, just if I'm being just totally objective about all of it, some of the coaching stuff on the field, I don't necessarily agree with. Sometimes I think he gets a little too cute sometimes with the play calling in key situations, and he's even said that in some of his press conferences before. And I think in the past, we don't see it at all hardly this year, but in the past, I think he relied way too much on the pass, way too much on trying to get the deep ball. Last year was almost comical at points where it would just seem like they just would come out and just throw the ball deep the whole game. And I say that, I say that loosely. Obviously, it wasn't every single play, but just an enormous amount of deep shots for something that just was not working whatsoever. But again, overall, Steve Sarkisian's done a great job. It hasn't been, sort of the quick turnaround that a lot of people want. And you're seeing it now, though. You're seeing it with Tennessee. They had that amazing season last year, and everybody was like, "Oh my God, Tennessee's back, national power," and they're not as good this season, and they won't be as good this season. You're seeing it in one season with Colorado. Deion Sanders trashed that roster, brought in a bunch of new guys. They had a couple of really good games early on, some big wins, and now they're in the meat of their schedule and they're getting thumped around. It's not easy to do what some of these guys have done. Lincoln Riley's another guy, went to USC right off the bat. They're, down to the wire, a playoff team. They didn't end up making the playoffs, but this year they're going to lose a lot of games because they have no defense whatsoever. And if Caleb Williams can't carry the team on his back, they're not going to win games. And you saw that against Notre Dame on Saturday. So these expectations that people have that you should be able to win, 10, 15 games immediately, it's ridiculous. It's just not going to happen. You got anything more to say about Steve on that?
I was muted. My bad.
No, you're good.
Yeah. At the end of the day, you look at. I know Mel Tucker had some other issues that were going on there. Issues or potential. Who knows? That's an entire box that's going to be unraveled in the next year or two with lawsuits and whatnot. But these teams that they do really well in year one under a head coach, and they have a lot of success via the transfer portal. Those teams don't last that we've
You're
seen.
right.
Like you look at a TCU last year.
Yep.
They had a lot of success year one. They're not looking the same under Sonny Dykes. I mean, it's just so you got to be careful about buying into fool's gold. But
Absolutely,
it seems like Steve, like this is something I felt like Steve Sarkisian. I feel like he knows that this is it. This is you don't get an opportunity better than this than Texas for a guy that's gotten a incredible amount of second chances. I mean, he's been very vocal about that. He understands that he's not taking it for granted, right? It's not like I deserve this job and I should be getting it, so I'm going to be here no matter what. It's not like maybe a previous coach that we had.
right.
He's taking very much a methodical approach to building this Texas team, and I think he understands that if he gets this up, if he does it right, just like I said, this is it for the opposite side. This is it. I mean, this is the program that if you do it right, you don't got to do it right anywhere else.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think Steve Sarkisian's probably, you've got guys like Dabo Swinney that are like, I don't do the transfer portal thing. I hate the NIL thing. And then you've got guys like, say, Dion that'll just flip the whole roster. And he did that for he's not going to do that every season.
Well, yeah, that's a little bit of a special circumstance.
Sure, absolutely.
Because that roster was so bad.
Yeah, it was terrible. Absolutely. The people that jump on Dion's ass, and I've jumped on Dion's ass for a lot of things, but it has nothing to do with that roster stuff. He had to do that if he wanted to be competitive this season, no doubt about it. And I think but back to my main point, he'll do that. He'll be in the transfer portal. Like that guy's going to play the transfer portal game. He's going to play the NIL game, probably more than a lot of coaches will. And I think Steve Sarkisian's like a really good mix of both of those. He understands you got to have long-term guys in the program to do what you want to do, but he also understands the impact you can get out of a single guy coming out of the portal. I think you look at Adonai Mitchell, and he's tried this the first 2 seasons, trying to get transfers in here at the wide receiver position that can really have an impact. I think Isaiah Nair would have. He gets hurt. And then we see, and I can't remember the kid's name out of Alabama, but just absolutely is a bust, doesn't do anything. Yeah, doesn't do what he needs to do to be on the football team, basically. And then now you're seeing Adonai Mitchell, and he's had a huge impact on this season already. I want to see Adonai Mitchell have more of an impact, honestly. But I think he's a guy down on the goal line. We should try to get matched up one-on-one, get the ball elevated, and let him go get it. I think he has that type of skill set. I think he can win those battles way more often than not. So I'd like to see that down on the goal line. But yeah, to your point, Steve Sarkisian, I think, is doing it right. He's never won 9 games or never won more than 9 games. I think this is the year he's gonna break through that, and he's gonna get a 10-win season at least this year. To me, that's almost like the floor for this roster. They're just so talented. The coaching staff is so good. I really feel like this team should bare minimum win 10 games this season. So he's going to do that, barring some 10 catastrophe.
10 games would be a disappointment, in my opinion. This is because here's the deal. I said this preseason. If you were to slap the Georgia logo on this Texas team, on this Texas roster, the minimum, and I understand Georgia has a weak schedule or whatever. Throw all that out. Alabama, whatever, Michigan, Ohio State. You put that logo on this roster, and people are saying it should be a national champion. Like you should be playing for the national championship.
Yeah, I think that's a fair take too. I just think when you go from 5-7, 8-5, to me, like 10 win is like that next sort of barrier to get through. And I'll tell you straight up, 10 win to me was like what I thought this team would do minimum, not what I thought they should do minimum. I'm kind of like you. This team is really, really talented. Absolutely, especially after we saw them play the first 5 weeks of the season, you look at it and you go, man, they're really good. When they went into Alabama and did what they did to Alabama, you got to go, that's a good team. Like Alabama is not, being Alabama like they've been, for the last decade this season, but they're still really talented and they're still really dangerous. They have not played good football yet this year, really against anybody, but they're winning games. And that's just the power of their roster, the power of their coaching staff, and they'll continue to improve throughout the season. I said last week, Alabama's going to win the West. I don't know if they'll win the SEC, but I bet you they're going to win the West. I think the only team in the West that can even come close to challenging them is LSU. And LSU's defense, I mean, Alabama might be able to score 40 against LSU's defense.
Alabama's another example of the battered fan syndrome. That this,
Sure.
after Alabama went out there and had the loss versus Texas, every week after, it was Texas fans trying to trash their own win. About Alabama's not looking as good as they're not good. It wasn't that good. Just enjoy it.
Yeah. It was interesting.
Just I get all the. Here's the deal: if you really believe that this isn't for real and it's fool's gold, enjoy it. If you don't think it's going to be, if you think there's more losses coming on the schedule, enjoy being 5-1. Right?
Yeah,
soak it up. It's been a long time since Texas fans have been in this area, so I don't necessarily share those opinions, but I don't get why. I don't know. It's one of these. I do understand why fans say that Texas fans are arrogant because it's like we've been how many years removed from playing in the national championship, and it's like immediately expectations. If we don't have that, everything else in that is it feels like a 4-point loss to Oklahoma, being our only loss so far on the schedule. It feels like there have been people that burn the ship down.
Yeah, no, I hear you. It just sucks losing to OU. I'll defend those fans and just say, man, it's terrible to lose to that team across the border. It's a different kind of loss. We could have got absolutely drug up and down the field against Alabama, and it would have been a different kind of feeling than walking out of the Cotton Bowl with a loss to Oklahoma. Nash, I appreciate you joining today. Tuesday, we'll have the after action review, and we'll go back and recap our Trace Otra games. We went 2 for 3 this last week, and then we'll probably have something random college football thought. Somebody will say something dumb in the news. We'll talk about that. Check out the podcast anywhere you listen to podcasts. Check out Nash at Nash Talks Texas and at Texas Clips. You can find him on YouTube and Twitter at Nash Talks Texas. Follow me and subscribe. Email horntakespodcast@gmail.com with all your questions, comments, concerns, and criticisms. I love them all. Again, Nash, appreciate you coming on the show. You guys get hooked.
Appreciate you for having me, man. Hook 'em.